And then I've actually got to go over and do just one more Christmas party. So he may decide he wants to take some questions, but I want to make sure that you guys heard from him directly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. First of all, I feel awkward being here, and now you're going to leave me all by myself. Let me just say a couple of things. First of all, I still spend about an hour a day trying to study this economy. And I'm not running for anything, and I don't have a political agenda. I tried to figure out what to do. I have reviewed this agreement that the president reached with the Republican leaders. And I want to make full disclosure. You know, I make quite a bit of money now, so the position that the Republicans have urged will personally benefit me. And on its own, I wouldn't support it, because I don't think that my tax cut is the most economically efficient way to get the economy going again. But I don't want to be in the dark about the fact that I will receive the continuation of the tax rates. However, the agreement taken as a whole is, I believe, the best bipartisan agreement we can reach to help the largest number of Americans and to maximize the chances that the economic recovery will accelerate and create more jobs, and to minimize the chances that it will slip back, which is what has happened in other financial collapses, like that's what Japan faced, and something that we have to avoid in America. Why do I say that? First of all, because clearly the extension of unemployment, which gives people a percentage of the income they were previously making, that money will be spent, and it will bolster the economy through the next couple of years. Secondly, the conversion of the Make Work Pay tax credit, which the president passed before, which went to 95% of the American people, converting that into a $120 billion one-year payroll tax relief act is, according to all the economic analysis, the single most effective tax cut you can do to support economic activity. This will actually create a fair number of jobs. I expect it to lower the unemployment rate and keep us going. Thirdly, one thing I haven't seen much about in the reports, this agreement will really help America for the long term, because it continues the credits for manufacturing jobs related to energy coming in to America. And I'll remind you, just in the last 2 years, there have been 30 high-powered battery factories either opened or presently being built in America, taking us from 2 to 20% of the world's share of that, and we're going to probably be at 40% by 2014. This is a really important thing, bringing manufacturing back to America, because it's a huge multiplier to create new jobs. So, in my opinion, this is a good bill, and I hope that my fellow Democrats will support it. I thank the Republican leaders for agreeing to include things that were important to the president. There's never a perfect bipartisan bill in the eyes of a partisan, and we all see this differently. But I really believe this will be a significant net plus for the country. I also think that in general, a lot of people are heaving a sigh of relief that there's finally been some agreement on something, but don't minimize the impact of the unemployment relief for working families, of the payroll tax relief, and of the continuation of the incentives to grow jobs, which will trigger more credit coming out of the banks. Keep in mind, ultimately, the long-term answer here is to get the $2 trillion, which banks now have in cash reserves, uncommitted to loans, out there in the economy again. The $1.8 trillion in corporate treasuries not now being invested out there in the economy again. I think this is a net plus. And you know how I feel. I think the people that benefit most should pay most. That's always been my position. Not for class warfare reasons, for reasons of fairness in rebuilding the middle class in America. But we have the distribution of authority we have now in the Congress and the one we're going to have in January. And I think this is a much, much better agreement than would be reached were we to wait until January. And I think it will have a much more positive impact on the economy. So for whatever it's worth, that's what I think. I would like to say one other thing on another subject, just to be recorded on record. They don't need my support on this because we have some good Republican support, including the first President Bush. I think this START agreement is very important to the future of our national security. And it is not a radical agreement. Boris Yeltsin and I agreed in principle on this same reduction, and there was no way in the wide world he could get it through the Russian Duma that existed at the time in his second term. So we didn't proceed because it couldn't be ratified there. I'm not sure the Senate would have ratified it then, but I think they will now with enough encouragement. But the cooperation that we will get from the Russians and the signal that will be sent to the world on non-proliferation, when all these other things are going on which threaten to increase nuclear proliferation, is very important. One of the things you know is that when people fool with these weapons, they're expensive to build, expensive to maintain, and expensive to secure the material that goes into making the weapons. This is something that is profoundly important. This ought to be way beyond party. They've worked very hard. They've worked out, in my opinion, the details, and I hope it will be ratified. Yes.
First of all, a lot of Democrats on Capitol Hill say this is a bad deal, that President Obama could have gotten more. What's your message to them? And then if I could also just ask, well, go ahead. Your hands.
First, my message is, I don't believe that's true, because in January, they will be in the majority. And this would dramatically reduce their incentive to extend unemployment benefits, to support the conversion of the Make Work Pay tax credit that President Obama enacted into this payroll tax deduction, which, as I said, I read all these economic studies. Every single unbiased economic study says the best thing you can do if you're going to take a tax cut path to grow the economy is to give payroll tax relief. I just got back from a trip to Asia with my foundation. Hong Kong, super free market place, had a stimulus. Oh, well, I guess we're not supposed to use that word anymore. You know what they did? They gave almost 10% of the people, low-income working people, 2 months free rent and public housing. They gave some money to the seniors. But the most important thing they did was payroll tax relief for a year. This is, all the people who study this believe it's the number one thing. So I don't believe they can get a better deal by waiting. And I think the other thing that nobody's talking about, but I'm telling you it's important, I live out there now and I do a lot of this energy work. These tax credits have made us competitive again. I didn't see a single story that credited Senator Reid's election with the fact that with 3 weeks before the election, 2 new plants were announced in Nevada, which has the highest unemployment rate in the state, 1,000 people making LED lights, 1,000 people making wind turbines for that big wind farm in Texas, both companies owned by Chinese interests, who said in no uncertain terms, we're here because you decided to compete with us for the future, and you gave us tax credits so we can pay higher labor costs because we saved the transportation costs because of these credits. I don't believe there is a better deal out there.
And then there's a follow-up. You mentioned the Republican Congress taking office in January. What was your advice to President Obama today about how to deal with a Congress from the opposition party?
I have a general rule, which is that if whatever he asks me about my advice and whatever I say should become public only if he decides to make it public. He can say whatever he wants, but
what do you
think? Here's what I'll say is I've been keeping the First Lady waiting for about half an hour, so I'm going to take off.
And
but,
I don't want to make her mad. Please go.
You're in good hands, and Gibbs will call last question.
Yeah, help me. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. President, is there anything else that can be done, in your opinion, to loosen up the private credit markets that have been so
Or we're going to
tight?
continue monitoring
Is it
this
that
press
people
conference,
think
a rare event, but if you ever want to have someone sell something for you, go to Bill Clinton, and he articulated the position for wayward Democrats on this compromise measure. You might have noticed right away that the former president zeroed in on the things that Democrats are the most apprehensive about. A compromise that has been generally deemed